Welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind all the NRL Physio content you see on social media. My co-host, James, mate, you are here. It is a Monday night instead of Sunday night because we have been absolutely pummeled by Cyclone Alfie up here, as I'm sure many people listening have been as well. It's been, a bit of a time. No intro music tonight, a bit more low tech for us. I am currently a bit of a refugee at my in-laws place. We've had to leave home because the power's just not on and doesn't look like coming back on anytime soon by the Energex website. So it's been a bit of a time. I was up at 3 a.m. last night with the water creeping towards my front door. So it's been fun, and I'm sure you're pretty similar with the weather, mate. It's good to have you. Round one is done. Our SuperCoach scores are in. There are some positives to look at, that's for sure.
Brien, there's plenty going on to discuss on the Magic Sponge tonight. I guess it started off very well for yours truly with the Broncos winning big on Thursday night. So the sort of start of the week was pretty good for me. I was really enjoying myself there, but you're right with the fallout from the cyclone, and obviously thoughts go out to everyone who's been affected by that. We've been relatively unaffected here on the sunny coast, to be fair, mate. I think Brisbane and a few other places around Queensland and New South Wales have copped it really bad. So hopefully, fingers crossed, people can get back on their feet and not sustain too much to house and work and everything else like that. It's a big impact for people, this stuff. So we need Lee Slater on the presser, Brien. We need Billy to give us a pump up speech to instill some Queensland spirit in everyone again and get us back on our feet and back into what we need to do. Don't you reckon?
Mate, I love that. Was so good. We were in one of our group chats and you sent through. I thought you were like joking at first. You're like, oh, we need, the Billy Slater, G'ing up and we need the Billy Slater, like, to get us through this cyclone. And then I was like, oh, I just typed in like Billy Slater cyclone. Turns out he's already done. He's already mentioned it.
It's so
good. We are Queenslanders, mate. We've been through cyclones. We've been through drought.
We're Queenslanders. Yeah. We are Queenslanders, Brien. He's put it so succinctly, and it's just perfect. It sums up our state and all about it.
William Slater, he won't pick David Fafita, but he knows how to rev up Queenslanders. That's I can't wait for Origin this year when he doesn't pick him again, and we can pick him in SuperCoach. We'll see how we go. All right, guys. As always, we're on YouTube. You know why you're here. All the injuries, we loop it back to SuperCoach. Talk about recovery times, all that jazz. Let's get straight into the injuries because who knows how long all this tech is going to hold up tonight. So let's get into the injury wrap for this week, which is brought to you by Pain Pod, drug-free pain relief anyone can use. And make sure that you use the promo code NRLP for 12% off any Pain Pod products. James, we usually have music here, but you just go straight for it, mate.
We'll do a hard launch straight in, Brien. So we're going to go into the HIAs. Two names here that have fantasy relevance. First one's Kulikefu, Finefuiaki from the Finns, and then also Victor Radley as well, Brien. Victor's had repeat concussions, but Finefuiaki is someone I really am keen on. But given that he had the HIA and failed, we have no idea what his minute's going to be there for the Finns either. So a couple of SuperCoach implications. Who do you want to go with first, and we can go along with it?
Yeah, we'll go to Finefuiaki first. He's look, you don't have to convince me to buy a Finns player, right? Like, I'm all over that. And I was really excited to see him sort of come to the Finns, play on an edge. He did look like he got pretty gassed pretty quickly, I must admit, getting into that second half, dropping off a few tackles, those kind of things. So whether he was going to be due a rest, because it's looking like Maxi Plath is going to play on an edge for most of the game, who knows why? Get him in the middle, please. I think this is going to give you an extra opportunity to take a look at him, because he won't play this Thursday night. That's too quick a turnaround. So best case, you're looking at getting him back round 3, and you can kind of see how his minutes go. So from a SuperCoach perspective, the silver lining there is, that if you don't own him, you've got that extra look at him. I think if you do own him, there's definitely, I wouldn't be jumping off him, as you just said. There are people who don't have him who are keen on him. He's definitely someone who I'm eyeing off as well. There's actually quite a few. I didn't pick any of the right mid-range 2RFs, but there's quite a few good ones in there, isn't there, that pique our interest.
Yeah, there's a few bouncing around. I think he's just one at just the most attractive price point of everyone. And given he had a few 80-minute games up at the Cows last year and went well, I thought, it'd be really nice to see what him and Lemuelu's minutes look like. But that's just a bit of a mystery. So I think you can have a look in round 3 and make a decision on round 4 or not, whether you go him. What about Victor Radley, Brien? This is one that has implications for the Roosters in terms of minutes on that edge, because I was surprised they picked him on the edge rather than 13. It looks like Siua Wong's probably got the inside running there for that spot, because Victor, would you assume it's going to be a short absence or a slightly longer one?
Mate, this is another Robbo special, I think. I actually saw, I can't remember whether it was a post-match presser or even a pre-match presser. I think it might have been the pre-match one. I was looking for information on Nat Butcher and those kind of guys, and he got asked about Victor playing on an edge, and he said that's his spot moving forward because he wants him to play 80 minutes every week. They want like an experienced forward out on the field for 80 minutes. I'm like, just play him 80 minutes in the middle, mate. Like, I could speak to Radley, right? So it sounds like he's going to be on an edge moving forward. Look, the big thing here, it's his 6th concussion in 4 seasons. So that's a lot, as you know, for those listeners of the Sponge would know that it's not specifically like once you've had X number of concussions, you need to take X number of weeks off. Each case is individual. The one thing I will say is multiple concussions in your past increase your risk by 30% of requiring an extended recovery. So yeah, like usually looking at for any first-time concussion sufferer, no concussion history, about 10%, just below 10%. Require kind of an extended recovery. I shouldn't say increases by 30%, increases it up to 30%. So about 1 in 3 concussion sufferers who have multiple concussions in their history, so then require, multiple weeks off. So look, the odds are still in his favor. That means 2 in 3, don't require that extended recovery. And they can come back, after having that 11-day stand down. But yeah, like 6 in 4 years, it's starting to stack up. He did, you see the reports the next day of woke up fine, which, all sounds well and good. But once again, as we know about concussions, they can have delayed, intermittent symptoms. We've had players who haven't, been affected by symptoms till day 3, 4 post that head injury, brain injury, I should say. So, look, one to watch. I don't think Siua Wong did enough for me. Like he was pretty poor actually from a SuperCoach perspective. I mean, I know they got smashed, but he's certainly not someone who I'd be running out to grab, even if Radley was going to miss 3 or 4 weeks. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. I wasn't super impressed with what he put out either. I think it was only 32 points in 68 minutes or something like that, Brien. So, not fantastic output for a guy that has been highly touted but hasn't really shown much yet. And maybe that's just partly opportunity. Maybe that's just partly the system thing. I don't know. But I think you need to watch and wait there for Siwa Wong. Speaking of the Roosters, we're going to talk about them and the Broncos next out of that game. So Nat Butcher and Salle Va'a were ruled out pre-game with medical-related illnesses, respectively. Then of lesser concern, Shibasaki and Reece Walsh were reported as leg injuries there. They're probably not much to delve into there, Brien. So probably the Roosters boys are the more interesting ones, I suppose, from an injury point of view.
Yeah, I think this is the Reece Walsh factor, right, mate? Is like he's probably the person I had the most questions about over the weekend, and it didn't look like much, I don't think. And I'm sure, you saw similar. Walsh seems to be dealing with something every game where he gets lit up or, hit awkwardly, but I'm assuming he'll be fine. Once again, I love the Bronx because they've got like 7 reporters, it seems like, who go to every training. So if Reece Walsh, wasn't training today, for example, we would have definitely heard about it. I feel like old Pep Dell or, Joel Gould or one of those guys would have been well onto it. So, yeah, I think don't worry about that. And then Shibasaki was reportedly cramping. The main thing with Nat Butcher and De La Selva, mate, we don't have much to go on here because it is look, they've been carrying their cards close to their chest. I think De La Selva, it's mainly not necessarily they're carrying their cards close to their chest, but more they don't actually know what's going on because his manager has come out and kind of said, look, we're still going through testing and all that kind of stuff. He went into hospital, came out of hospital, started coughing up blood, went back into hospital. So he's on the mend. And then Nat Butcher, all I've been told is that it's a stomach issue, something to do with his stomach. So both guys, I mean, Salle Va'a is probably not back for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Nat Butcher, hopefully a little bit sooner, but there's a lot of uncertainty here. So I'd love one of the Roosters forwards to jump out of the ground, and, especially a Roosters cheapie. I had a look at a few guys. There are a few cheapies in there from the Roosters who scored quite well, like late 30s. So potentially there might be a role there for somebody if, someone jumps out and wants to take it. So definitely a watch over this week, particularly, is that maybe one of those Roosters cheapies might become really valuable.
Yeah, really good point. I think like Blake Steep and Finefuiaki as well were the two that were, I think Finefuiaki's basement price and Blake Steep's 230 or something like that. Yeah. So they're both reasonably attractive in terms of price. But yeah, the minutes and the rotation is going to be the interesting one there for the Roosters moving forward. We'll go on to the Knights v Tigers. No injuries out of that game, but Tyson Gamble was ruled out pre-game with back surgery. So I don't know much detail about Tyson Gamble's surgical approach here, Brien, but report was he was dealing with fairly significant backhand leg pain coming into the season that just wasn't responding to non-operative management.
Yeah, they kept throwing needles at it, injections at it, and apparently it just got to a point where it wasn't settling down. So, sounds like a pretty typical disc bulgy kind of injury where the disc is pinching on the nerve, irritating it, and causing those symptoms. So, yeah, look, I mean, in everyday people, as you and I would know, often the suggestion here is give it time to settle down. But when we're playing for sheep stations like the NRL boys are, they don't often have time. So they look at surgery. And the initial report was around 4 to 6 weeks potentially, which is very, very short for a back surgery. But off the back of that, I'd say they're just going in and trimming away like a microdiscectomy, partial microdiscectomy, where they just trim away that bulging part of the disc away from there, and hopefully that settles his symptoms down. I think the one thing I would say here is that, there's no guarantees with back surgery, right? Even minor back surgery, it's not something where it's, like a hamstring injury where they're, hamstring strain back in 4 weeks, and they're usually back in 4 weeks. It'll be a bit of a one to watch. And also worth mentioning is that I spoke to someone, or someone sent me a message that he knows Tyson, and apparently Tyson said, I would rather any injury I've suffered in footy ever, because this was the worst pain I've ever had. And so I only say that mainly to, reach out there to any people who are listening who are suffering from back pain. Almost, I know, I guess misery loves company in a way, in that, even the NRL guys who have these back injuries, these nerve back injuries, they can really, really affect not only their footy, but their everyday life. So if you're going through similar, it's not just you. There's other people out there too, even at the highest level of athleticism, who have it as well.
Well summed up there, Brien. We'll go to the Bunnies v the Finns. No injuries out of the game apart from Ty Munro. So this looks like a collarbone re-injury, and I'll throw it straight to you for the details of this one, Brien. But the Bunnies, they can't take a trick in 2025, even though 2024 they got absolutely hosed by injury. They're getting put in a rinse cycle again this year, aren't they, with injury again?
Yeah, mate. This is one of the most unique injury situations that I've seen. Really, like I wouldn't say that I've seen more than 2 collarbone fractures in either a patient that I've seen, or an NRL player that I've tracked. For example, like I've been tracking the NRL injuries since 2017. I wouldn't have seen a player with more than 2. So to have 4 now, I know that 3 are being really widely reported, because he had 2 last year and then he's had the one this year. But there was one the year before that as well, that he had, that was before he debuted in the NRL and all that kind of stuff. So he's definitely had 4. Now, a bit to your point, there's been a lot of reports, and I think it might have even been Wayne Bennett or someone mentioned, he's done both now. And that kind of gave the impression that it was his other collarbone. And we were talking about it before the pod, and I was like, I better check this. Like, don't take anyone's word, for gospel. And it's the right collarbone again. We've got footage from the game last year where he broke the collarbone, and he's grabbing at the right collarbone. And then this year he leaves the ground. We've got a photo of him with his right arm in a sling. So this would be the third right collarbone fracture, because he had the fracture in the preseason last year, had 9 weeks off, then had another fracture. So had surgery, definitely had surgery the second time. We're not sure if he had surgery the first time. So he's gone back in to have surgery again for this one. So the hardest thing here is that surgery does decrease your risk of refracture. It's down usually around like 2-3% versus like 15 to 20% for non-surgery. So surgery, putting that, it's a tricky surgery because the collarbone's a bit of a bendy bone. So sometimes you can't get a plate to fit it perfectly. And there's a lot of nerves in the area. So it takes a highly skilled surgeon, not that they're not all highly skilled, but yeah, it takes a highly skilled surgeon. And yeah, like the fact that he's had that surgery at the end of mid last year, and now he's fractured again. It sounds a bit like the Ryan Pappenhausen one with his fibula, where potentially he's like fractured it at the end of the plate, where there does seem to be an increased risk of fracture. So the question is where to from here. A bit like Paps, like, they're probably chucking a longer plate on it, for example, to cover the old fracture site, this new fracture site, and just make sure everything's covered. In terms of his risk going forward, I mean, usually I would say a surgery decreases your risk by, down to about 2 to 3% for a collarbone fracture. But like for this guy, now that there's been 4, like, is there a genetic predisposition? Is it something where it's his technique going into tackles, the way he runs? Yeah, look, I don't really have the answers, and I'm sure Souths don't really have the answers, because it's now 4 times now, and it keeps happening. So it's something they're going to have to look at and see. Does he wear like a chest guard, for example, some sort of padding on there? But I still expect him back. Like, just because this is a 4th one, I still expect him back around that 6 to 8 week mark. But it's just more prevention moving forward, I think. Like, have you? Going down the track of, like, I've never seen it. We'll open it up to the floor with your sort of patient distribution as well. Have you ever seen someone with, say, more than 2 collarbone fractures?
Look, I can't think of. Look, maybe I can't remember one off specifically off the top of my head. The ones you see most commonly through hospital system, I suppose, are people that have been involved in motor vehicle, motorbike accidents, and probably the ones that are higher risk are probably people in their middle age who are cigarette smokers and probably menopausal, like so early menopausal women as well. So generally the ones that have lower bone density anyway, all those risk factors to bone healing, I suppose, especially with cigarette smoking really delays healing. With those ones, sometimes the surgical approach isn't really very forgiving with the collarbones as well, Brien, even if they use bone grafts. So bit of a messy situation for Ty Munro. I don't know what the answers are here, or what's going on there, whether it's around the plate or not. I don't know what the surgical options there are for him, or whether they have to just shut it down and give him more time for it to fully heal up and take plate out and get him going with it. I guess the hard thing is with if you're going to pad it up or brace it up, as a winger, you got to be able to get all the way up into like full end of range shoulder extensions. You can't really limit him too much. You could with, say, like a half or a middle forward, for example. It's a bit of a catch-22 there with his function. So I don't really know what the options are there for Ty Munro. Hopefully, he's probably is he just gone 20 or 21, Brien? He's only still pretty young as well. So he's probably not even fully skeletally mature, I guess, is the other situation here to consider, is that he might still have some growing to do. Like, it's foreseeable, isn't it? We definitely have seen guys shoot up, into, say, 19, 20, even to age 21. So he may not be fully done there yet either, but if he doesn't really seem to have any of those other risk factors we commonly see with people, diabetics, cigarette smokers, postmenopausal women, low bone density as well, women as well. I can think of like those really, rail thin females who are heavy cigarette smokers that they don't really have great bone stock to sort of pin and plate in there for a collarbone. So, he's definitely not that. So hopefully for Ty Munro's sake and the Bunnies, they can get him back on the park. Anything else you want to add there? Sorry, Brian, I've hijacked you there a bit.
No, mate, not at all. I like it. I like the perspective. I definitely threw it to you for that. Certainly that position as well. But yeah, no, people have asked, like, what does it mean for Souths? I think the main thing here is preventing refracture. Like, I don't think there's like once again, people always go to the, will he need to retire? Like, that's not the case here, but it's just trying to put some things in place to look at trying to reduce the risk of refracture. And as you said, is it bone graft? Is it surgical technique? Is it a technical thing with the way he plays? Is it pat? Like, yeah, they're just going to have to look at a few different things and try and come up with, because yeah, I'm famous, I think, for being like, oh, look, it's just bad luck, like in footy, it's a contact sport. But I think for clavicle fractures now, collarbone fractures now, that is too much of a pattern and too unique for me to just fob it off as, we just fob it off to bad luck. We've got to try and figure out what's going on here, and I think South will have to do that for sure.
Nice shout there. Dragons v Bulldogs. Thanks, Brien. Sam Hughes was ruled out pre-game ankle injury. From the match, Steve Crichton was brought as cramping, so nothing concerning there, but probably not very Supercoach relevant there. Old Steve Crichton, he was one I had a flyer on and draft, and it hasn't really worked out. Kurt Mann with an eye injury is reported as not a fracture, but just a decent shiner. And then for the Dragons, Ryan Couchman, ACL injury, so that's terrible news for Ryan Couchman. He'll be missing the rest of 2025. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, mate. He was both the Couchman brothers. We're big New South Wales, Queensland Cup stats guys. Like, you love to pick a sneaky player up who's got awesome stats in the Cup, and then come into NRL, and then Couchman, both the Couchmans, but particularly Ryan. I think his stats were particularly impressive coming up from Cup. So he was someone I was actually quite high on heading into the season. It was as ACLs go, that was one of the most innocuous ones too. Like, it was just such a small change of direction. I actually saw the final kind of mechanism where he let, it was Bronson Jerry run straight past him. Yeah. And I kind of saw it and was like, oh, that didn't look like much. Like, I was looking at his ankle because he didn't do that typical like ACL grab at the front of his knee. So I was like, oh, is it ankle? And that was the only thing I'd seen. And I was just like, that just doesn't make any sense. I'll have to go back. So I went back and found that mechanism that I eventually put on socials and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, this is another one where it's like, always take the sideline report with a grain of salt, because I think it was initially like, oh, he's hyperextended his knee. They think it's a medial. He should be back soon. And I mean, if you look at that mechanism, if anybody's interested in jumping in the broadcast channel, I think it is on Instagram, I kind of straight away, as soon as I found it, went, oh, this is really concerning for an ACL. So thoughts go out to him, young fella. Look, because it's early, like, prospects for him next year are better than usual. So, I mean, we've seen guys like Tommy Gilbert and hopefully Tino this weekend come back from ACLs pretty well as forwards. So you tend to expect that with forwards. Kurt Mann with his eye, that's opened up today. The swelling's coming down, so he should be fine for next week. And then Stephen Crichton was just cramping, and Sam Hughes with the ankle, it sounded like he was pretty close last week. So I think the Doggies should have their full complement next week out of those guys anyway.
Eagles versus Cowboys was the next one, Brian. So Siua Taukeiaho was a knee or calf concern here, and then Tolu Koula was a cork injury. And this is a bit of a spanner for me, Brian, because I've got Ben Turbo in my standard setups, and I saw Ben Turbo go the full 80, but Corey Waddell subbed in for Tolu Koula. So obviously we're not really too sure if Ben Turbo's got an 80-minute spot locked down there or not, because Koula came off early. Probably unlikely to miss games as well with the cork injury there, Brian. So it might be a bit of a watch and wait there for Ben Turbo enthusiasts like yours truly.
You love yourself a Benny Turbo, mate. I know that well and truly by now. Yeah, look, I don't think Koula's going to miss any time if it truly is a cork. I didn't find the mechanism, couldn't really find anything too obvious. So, yeah, that's a watch and wait. And then Taukeiaho, just worth mentioning, I've got him in a couple of draft leagues and saw he only scored like 25 points, or he scored 25 points in the first like 20 minutes. And I was like, fantastic. Come back and do that again. You know, a guy who I picked like exclusively in the 16th and 17th rounds. If he gets you 50 points every week, you're just cheering at front row. But he didn't come back. He did have ice around his knee/calf. Once again, didn't see a mechanism. So yeah, just 2 to watch out for. We by the time you're listening to this, team list might already be out. But yeah, just for those Taukeiaho owners potentially in draft or in Classic, if there are any, I wouldn't be dropping him off the back of that because I don't think it was a planned thing. It does look like it was injury related.
Last game, Brien, was the Storm versus the Eels, absolutely drubbing by the Storm to start off the season. Ryan Matterson ruled out pre-game with a back injury, and then Mitch Moses is a really interesting one we need to talk through, Brien. So it's been reported as a foot stress reaction. So he's been ruled out for multiple weeks, kind of indefinitely, isn't it? It's sort of the time frame that's been used widely in the media. But one that we talked about on the pod probably a few weeks ago leading into the season, as someone that we weren't overly keen on given his off-season surgery and given the goal kicking to Zach Lomax. But this is a bad sort of development there for the Eels, on top of losing Dylan Brown today by look things as well. So a couple of body blows there for Para.
Yeah, mate, I think the timing of this one was really good before like we found out he was having foot soreness. And look, mate, we love medical quackery on this show, as you know, and we'll get more than enough wrong. But we were bang on with this one. Like as soon as you start hearing foot soreness with a history of a fifth metatarsal fracture and surgery like he has, that is, yeah, it's quite concerning, and especially because they had done every scan under the sun in inverted commas there and hadn't found anything. That's always a bit of a, what's going on here. There has to be something causing that foot soreness, and it's probably an underlying, once again, stress build up that isn't getting picked up by, really, really general scans. And he has to have, a more specific bone scan or something like that to try and figure out what's going on. So look, it's not the end of the world. It's not a stress fracture at this point. So that means there isn't structural integrity issues. There isn't a crack in the bone, effectively, in simple terms. There is bruising in the bone, and that is a precursor to a fracture. So if he kept going on that, it would almost certainly develop into a fracture. So it usually comes on because of load over time. So people are asking, like, did it not heal from last year? Is this something where he came back for Origin too early? If he did all of those things, if he came back for Origin too early, we would have known about it back then. Now, I don't know if he was having foot soreness back then. Like, I doubt it. But yeah, like if he came back and was getting foot soreness and it comes out that, Para were playing him through foot soreness even back then yeah, absolutely, that's the reason it caused it. But if not, if it kind of is how it appears, it's just unfortunately, it is a bone with a poor blood supply. It's a bone that cops a lot of stress when running. You look at over the off season, he's probably been, Jason Rolls, he's a leader in the club. He wants to set fitness standards, all those kind of things. So lots of Ks through the legs, lots of pressure on the foot. And yeah, he's developed, and it only developed recently too. It wasn't like they specifically noted that this time around over the off season, it's only developed in the last couple of weeks. So it wasn't like it came on in December and then he was running through it. It's only come on in the last couple of weeks. So in terms of management, it's all about load, really. They need to get load off it to allow that bone bruising in there to heal up, settle down, and then gradually build that load back up. So I think they've got him in a boot for at least a few weeks, a moon boot, to take the pressure off. Then they'll gradually build him back up. I think the main thing I want to say here is they've said 6 weeks. What I want to say is, look, we're obviously not assessing Mitch or anything like that, but usually under usual circumstances, a time frame like 6 weeks would be just best case. That's kind of best case scenario. It could be longer because that stress reaction might not react the way we want. He might start to load that bone back up and there's still soreness there. So once again, like, we can repeat the thing. I've had a few questions. Do you take the screw out? Taking the screw out isn't just as simple as taking the screw out and we're sweet, because that screw, if, and we're getting mathematical here, but if the circumference of that bone that he has fractured in the past is 1 centimeter, that screw might take up, 0.5 to 0.6 centimeters of that that circumference. So it's a lot, like, it's quite a sizable screw in a bone. So just taking it out, you need to wait for that bone to fill in that screw hole again. So it'll be a whole process. So yeah, this is one where it like minimum 6 weeks. It could be longer as well. So not fantastic news for Para, but yeah, look, it's the nature of these injuries. Like I posted the other day, when he first fractured it, he was my injury of the week on Patreon, RIP Patreon. Sorry that you're not still here, but I did a big write-up on him when he first fractured it, sort of looking at different examples in other sports. So like I had a guy at Man United who he took 12 weeks off initially. I think Mitch Moses took 10 weeks off. This guy took 12 weeks off. Played for 8 weeks and then refractured. So it's one of those, it's got a 15 to 20% or 10 to 20% refracture rate. It's just a tough bone. It doesn't have fantastic blood supply, gets a lot of pressure. So yeah, it's a tough one. I've been on a big rant, James. Anything you want to add there? It's just a tough one for Para fans, especially after the result on the weekend.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, results, and you see Dylan Brown in the media, sort of on his way to the Knights next year.
Yeah.
It sort of feels like it might be a bit of a wasted season for Para this year, unfortunately, or maybe a bit of a rebuild for the next couple of years there. So it's going to be a tough gig for Jason Rolls. Not one that going to be a bit of a baptism for him, unfortunately, I feel, for his first head coaching gig. So we're going to move on to the questions, Brien. Thank you to everyone who submitted them to you via the socials. First one is about Jacob Kiraz. Do we have any injury updates there on Jacob Kiraz and his hip injury?
Yeah, so he's back training and apparently not too far away. So it does sound like it's but actually mentioning hip injuries with Kiraz, apparently friend of the show, Billy Smith, friend of the show, not because he's been on the show, but because he's been mentioned that many times on the show. It sounds like they've both got like those labrum cartilage injuries. It's just something they've got to manage. So yeah, it sounds like Kiraz might not be too far away. He's still not a guy who I'd be jumping on really quickly. I'd want to see kind of how he performs first before I jump in too fast. From a draft perspective, I mean, I'll throw to you as our SuperCoach expert. Is Kiraz someone who you would buy low on potentially? If you've got a Kiraz owner who say is 0-1, he might go 0-2 after this week. Do you try and buy Kiraz low? Are you not too worried about the hip injury?
Yeah, good question. I haven't even thought about this, Brian, to be honest. But look, I think it's worth a crack. He's got a proven record, and he's just got such a super coach friendly game. I think, he's just a week winner. When Jacob Kiraz gets 1 or 2 tries, you're in the hundreds, and that can just win you a week. So I think you're better off rolling the dice on someone like that than possibly someone else in your team who's just going to punch out 50 or 60 for you, or even in that 60 range. I think Kiraz has got a bigger ceiling than that. So he's a favourite of mine anyway, the big Lebanese seeder, so I'd be looking for a bit of it in my team if I could get it. Question 2, Brien, is about Brent Naden's knee injury. Is it season ending, or are we looking at a return in 2025 for Brent Naden, possibly later in the year?
Yeah, no, we did. I think we covered this a couple of weeks ago, but thankfully avoided any surgery for that kneecap dislocation. Didn't have any ACL damage. I think we said at the time, like, buy a lotto ticket. What an absolute miracle for him. So fantastic news on that front. They were thinking 6 to 8 weeks. This is another one though where 6 to 8 weeks kind of minimum. There is a high redislocation rate when there's no surgery involved. So it's something they're going to have to take extra time with. So not season over, but also not back anytime soon. I think you're looking at, at least kind of round 6+ before he would be coming back. Sweet.
Really nice, Brian. I think that's the wrap for the questions there. We can launch into SuperCoach Corner. Do you want to start by giving us your team, how you ended up lining up for the first round of the season there, Brian? Because we spoke about it on the pod, but there might have been some last-minute changes. Did you make any last-minute changes to when we spoke last?
Mate, I'm sure I did. I think, I'm cursing you now, but I own my own team. I make my own calls. So I did bring in Matt Burton over Cam Munster. It was just that round 2 bye and then into Penrith kind of, scared me off. They look so good on the weekend, and Cam Munster looks so good. Mate, like the one thing I'm so stoked that we pumped up Cam Munster as like a back end of round 1, early round 2 pick after the weekend because he looks fantastic. I'm also happy that we pumped up Ryan Pappenhausen as a good buy because he looked fantastic as well. The Storm just looked good, but those two guys look particularly healthy, and performance-wise, they look good too. So another win for the Sponge, which is always good to see. So I did bring Burton in. Selwyn Throbo made both of our sides, which was, 85, but 3 tries. Selwyn, we need some more involvement. So let's get that rig going. A bit more involvement will be good. I think that's about it, though. I had Hopgood. I think they're the only 2 main changes. So you're very gracious in letting me go first here, mate, seeing you beat me this week. So I got 12.27. I think I'm ranked about 30K or so. Trades-wise, I'm usually a big fan of like max trading the first 2 weeks just to try and get those guys who you're high on. Even though I like, a middling kind of score, there's no major fires for me because even the guys, like I'll say, if there's any trades I'm looking at, it's kind of like a Metcalf or a Safar. They're probably the 2 most underperforming guys. And like even then, like Metcalf, you could argue give him a bit of time. Does Tamari Martin come back in as Metcalf get a little bit better with his involvement there? And then Safar needed a HIA too. So they're probably my main 2 I'm considering. I'm thinking about holding at the moment. If I did anything, my temptation is to go Metcalf down to Tamale in the CTW. We were big Tamale guys in the preseason. The only problem with that is I think Xavier Savage is suspended and Hopewadi comes. So you don't know whether Tamale's won the spot this week. It's probably one that should wait to next week. But the eye test, I just love Tamale in Vegas, so I might go there. Then I'd have about 670K to go up to any 2RF or FRF. Now, mate, I'll throw to you and ask for your team and your score. But like my main options are Payne Haas, Hamole, Olokwatu, like both scored over 100 or close to it on the weekend. The one I'm most excited about, mate, is our boy Paddy Carrigan. Like, he looked fantastic. He played like 67 minutes. I think I had a look. Payne Haas played 50 minutes or so. Not that I think it'll be like that every week. But Paddy, I think he based like into the 70s. Mate, he looked really, really good floating between front row and lock. What I'm saying to you is talk me out of Paddy Carrigan because I think he's the most point of difference out of those 3 as well. Like, he's the lowest owned. He's the one I'm eyeing off. Am I crazy out of those 3 picking Paddy Carrigan, or is it not a bad move?
No, it's not a bad move. He definitely passed the eye test and he looked elite, and now he's front row eligible, he's dual. That's huge, for positional flexibility in your team. Just trying to think, I will. Just to turn you off, Payne Haas, I blew up my team in round 2 last year to bring Payne Haas in before he got his knee injured, and it derailed my season. So with that in mind, I don't want history repeating itself, Brien, with you blowing up your team for round 2 to bring Payne in.
That's a great call, mate. That's the arrow to the bullseye. This is how it happened last year. Yeah, I'm not getting that.
And on the other side of that, on the other side of that, I'll say I think Payne Haas played 42 minutes. Like 11 tackle breaks. He's throwing bulk offloads. It's hard to go against him, really. Like, I think he'll see bigger minutes. I think there'll be a more even split there. I think the Broncos just took their foot off the gas towards the end of the game because they were just flogging the Roosters. I think they were just like, we'll just keep Payne Haas on ice and that's all good. Whereas I think Carrigan's already out there, so it's like, we'll just play Paddy some minutes. So, but I like him as a point of difference because I don't think he's highly rostered. I don't know what the numbers are in front of me here, mate, but yeah, the Payne Haas 2024 season for yours truly, that really derailed my year because I used 3 trades to boost him in, and I used 3 trades to boost him out a week later. So it really crippled my team last year. So maybe don't repeat that. Maybe just do your own thing with Paddy Carrigan. There might be a bit of a better omen there for the Broncos moving forward. So I might just recap my team, mate, if you're happy for me to launch in there.
Yeah, so
I ended up making quite a few changes to my team as it sort of came through the week. So I went Corey Pakes and Sendon Smith at hooker, Taylor Main, Corey Horsburgh. Then I ditched the idea of having anyone decent at front row 3 or front row 4. When I saw Saluka Fafita get named to start for the Bulldogs, I was like, I'm the smartest super coach ever. I'm going to get him straight in. He scored 17. And I was like, Went from like the penthouse to the what house. So that was a bit of a letdown, even though he looked really good for the like 15 minutes that he played on the field. Bit of a weird sort of rotation there at the Bulldogs. I don't know what's doing, but yeah, I thought, 232, he's starting. If he just sniffs 30 or 35 minutes for a couple of weeks, I'll be really happy with that. Anyway, that might well blow up in my face. That might be a dud move. Then also took the para front row forward who got named instead of Ryan Matterson. So I brought in Tuivati as well. He was 198k. It was him or the Dragons player, and I just guessed incorrectly there. So that's all right. It's not a big deal. In the second row is where I made a lot of changes, though. So I've got Fafita, Katoa, Liam Martin, Ben Turbo, Seyfarth, and Hubner. The Katoa Fifita thing's a hard one because the first 2 weeks my scores are probably going to be a bit affected by having both of them on bye, but I'm hoping by round 3 I'm absolutely flying there. Nico and Duffy were the halves. Burton and Weeks. Weeks was the lowest scorer in my team this week, so he's 33 at the lowest, which is a bit of a head scratcher. But I'm happy to sit and hold there. Garrett, Cobbo, Marzu, Skelton, Purdue, Shibasaki, Toya. I think everyone's got that set up, and the 3 fullbacks. I think we had that last week: Ponga, Turbo, and Iongi. So I guess when I look at my team, like it's the fires that I'm really worried about is Nico Hines or Nathan Cleary, because Cleary's got the Roosters this week and he could legitimately score 150 this week. And I am really terrified of missing out on that. So my trade scenarios, like I really don't have that many misses in my team. I got 1261 score this week, so I'm ranked about 24k. But again, I'm not too unhappy with that, given I've got Katoa and Fafita to nurse through these first couple of rounds. But the Nico Cleary scenario is not good, and I feel pretty yuck about that, not having Cleary this week when I saw what the Roosters dished up last week, because Penrith could do an absolute number here. So my options are go Seyfarth down to Jack Goz. Finefuiaki I can get in, but you're taking a risk on him getting a starting spot there in 80 minutes, and he's not going to play this week, or one of the Roosters cheapies. So I'm sort of in a bit of no man's land there with who I'd take Seyfarth down to. And I think Seyfarth is going to play 80 minutes, so I'm kind of reluctant to do that just for the sake of doing it. But I think the upgrade from Nico to Cleary is probably, I think I've just got to do it, Brian. I don't think I can sit and wait and hope for the best. So I've got to make that trade and just take 2 and probably just save the boost. Because my round 2 trade options, I think Tamale is definitely an option in round 2. And then any second row or centre wing with a huge negative break even is the other one. Round 3, I think you've got to keep your eyes on the Titans, the Storm, and the Dragons, boys. There's so many dudes on offer there. Like you're talking, Tino, Fafita, Fermor, maybe even Jaden Campbell, maybe Kanokini. From the Storm, it's everyone. It's like, Munster, Paps, Hughes, Jack Howarth looked unbelievable the other day. Like he's one at centre wing. You got to look at Jack Howarth at 420k. Eli Katoa looked at business. The Storm are absolutely flying. Harry Grant looks good if you want to go that way. And then even the Dragons, I think there's a couple of relevant guys there. Like Crichton Tuipulotu, if he just keeps getting bulk tries, the left winger scored 3 tries in the Charity Shield. Tuipulotu scored 3 tries there the other day. It seems like the left wing is the spot to have for the Dragons. They've also got like Emre Guler in the front row. Couchman as well, saw 70 minutes in the front row. That's a good get for 480 grand. Who else is there as well? Like even the rookie, like he was there at front row forward, looking good. So there's a few guys that have a bit of fantasy relevance for the Dragons there just because of their price point. So there's a few things to probably keep in mind there. I'm just trying not to hit the boost like I did last year, because I think last year I went boost in the first 3 rounds, and I think I just blew my team to oblivion. But I just don't think I can go without Nathan Cleary, mate. I think with Nico, with the uncertainty there, I got away with that one the first week when he put up 50. But I think if you're going to roll the dice or play with fire without Nathan Cleary in your team, I think that's probably just not a scenario I want to entertain. I can't really go Duffy up to Cleary. I can't really make that gap. But I think I can go Nico up there, and that probably sits a little bit better with me. What do you reckon about that, Brian? Would you be pulling the trigger if you were in my situation, getting rid of Nico and bringing in Cleary? Like it sort of kind of feels sideways when you think about the start of the year, and not to overreact, but I just don't think, without the kicking guarantee, rolling with Nico, you could be missing heaps of points with Cleary. And, with the low score of your 17 with that flex position, I think you got to have the ceiling guys in your team, don't you?
Yeah, mate. I think I'd throw it back at you an interesting question, like because we were as high on Nico as anyone in the preseason. If Cleary was playing the Storm this week, for example, is that still a trade you'd make?
Probably not.
Yeah.
To be fair, I just sit and wait.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is like I think for me, I'm actually really comfortable having Nico and Cleary as my halves at the moment, because it's not necessarily that like Cleary went out in week 1 and like made himself like a must buy, but the Roosters went out in week 1 and made Cleary a must buy. You know what I mean? Or a must have. Like I just don't think, as you say, like I don't like you just couldn't watch the footy. I don't think you could watch that game if you don't own Cleary. You would literally just hate every moment of it unless Cleary copped an early injury, because it would just be terrifying knowing that so many people out there have him and have him captained against a Roosters team who didn't look great last week, won't have Radley this week. Yeah, it's just not good prospects. So, I mean, look, it'd be the ultimate point of difference move to not captain Cleary this week, but I just think this early in the season, it's just not your time to, for me, and maybe I'm being a coward there, but yeah, I'm more than happy to take Cleary against that side that ran out there last week and then minus Victor Radley, and just hope that he puts up an absolutely mega score. So, and as I said, happy as anyone and as high as anyone on Nico, but I still think the Nico to Cleary trade this week is a good one if you can't go Duffy up to him, because Duffy up to him is just, yeah, that's just crazy talk. Like it would take, you'd probably have to boost and get rid of 2 like mid to upper ranges just to do it, which would be really hard. But yeah, look, I think, how are you feeling about Duffy at the moment? Because he's someone for me who I kind of was like always expecting in the back of my mind, I'm taking a bit of a risk here, going Nico and Cleary. I'm probably going to have to downgrade one of them to Duffy after round 2. After the weekend, I'm thinking maybe I don't. It obviously depends on whether Nico gets the kicking back this weekend and how he looks. But yeah, what did you think about Duffy? Obviously, give him a couple of weeks and see how he goes as a rookie.
Yeah, I think so. I think even longer. They just ran into just a hornet's nest at Brookvale, didn't they? Like, Manly at Brookie, they give every good team a run for their money, and the Cowboys are going to be a mid-range team this year at best. So I don't think you can sort of put that all on Tom Duffy. I think there'll be better days ahead. He kicked the first one, but not the second one. So I don't know what was doing there towards the end of the game, whether he's, got them or lost them. Clifford was named in the extended, but not named. So I guess team list will tell the story. Like if he doesn't get named this week, I think that's an absolute stitch up by Todd Payton and probably pretty poor coaching to give a debut player 1 game. I think you got to give him a few to see what you got and see what the team's going to deliver. So no, I think he's a watch and wait. I wouldn't sort of be worried about it. I think people that are like, oh, he scored so poorly, he did so bad. I'm like, well, you shouldn't be starting him in your 17 anyway.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest thing, is he should be someone just sitting and slow burning on your bench, because all you need from these guys is 1 week. And if you can just get 1 week out of them, then the cash starts to roll in. That's all you need. You just need to go, all right, is there just a week where something can fall his way? Is there a week where the Cowboys can go big in the first 4 or 5 weeks? They're probably going to happen. The Cowboys have historically, in recent times, had pretty good attack. So I think the points will come there for Tom Duffy. I wouldn't be too worried about him moving forward. I don't think he's certainly a must-have, though, depends probably on Nico. If he's not kicking, geez, you could put the money to probably better use there with Nico Hines, couldn't you, really? Like, you could almost, just go big at hooker, because you could bring in Sandon Smith and, bring whoever you want in hooker and have some money over. So you could probably upgrade a couple of positions there, potentially. Lots of options, I guess. But Nico, we were so big on him, Brien, but hasn't really fallen his way this year so far, unfortunately. So I don't want to overreact after 1 week, but man, oh man, it's hard not to when you see what Nathan Cleary did in Vegas and how good he looked.
I think that's the thing, is that it's the matchups. Like, I think if Cleary didn't have the matchups that he had, it wouldn't be as concerning. But I just think with the matchups, he's the clear number 1 option at this point in time. But yeah, I'm not willing to give up on Nico yet. I think, as we said, last week on the pod, it comes down to this week in terms of like the goal kicking and how he looks. Like if he's not goal kicking this week, then I just think he has to be dealing with an injury that they're not telling us about, because I don't see why he would take that first goal kick in the trials and then not kick. So yeah, it would have to be a pretty significant one for him to not kick, now 4 weeks later. So yeah, watch and wait for Nico. But otherwise, guys, that is a wrap for this week. If you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend. It makes a big difference to get the show in front of new people. But otherwise, we will be back hopefully a bit drier for round 2. Thanks for listening along as always, and up the mighty, mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.